Hello again. Today we're finally doing it. The moment you've all been waiting for is here. I'm doing a solo ice sheet run. Losing is fun, the whole nine. But I'm going to be doing it a little bit differently. Instead of spawning on the ice sheet as a snivelling weak human, I'll be crafting the perfect being, specifically designed to withstand the brutal cold of the ice sheet. So meet David Bishop, the optimistic, jogging ice blob. He's resistant to frostbite, psychically deaf, cold tolerant, moves faster when he's cold, deals more melee damage, is rowdy and will resist arrest whilst shooting ropes of not particularly motile sperm from an elevated position thanks to his gas bags. He's also got a fluffy tail and his body is covered in fur, unlike his head, which is a gaseous hood. He's also got genetically poor cooking, social and artistic skills whilst being gifted in melee combat. So yeah, he's a pretty complex dude. And he arrives in his new home at the very southern pole of the planet, where the average temperature is negative 53 degrees Celsius. That's so cold that if you shook it too hard after a piss, the damn thing might just snap off. He follows a quite simple ideology called ice cubism, the core tenets of which are transhumanism and cannibalism. Because on the ice sheet, people paste is the way to do it. But that's a long way off. Right now we have nothing, so we'll deconstruct some ancient monuments for stone blocks, with which we'll build a room around a geothermal vent, the classic ice sheet starter base. It gets hot enough in here that Bishop's got to sleep his first night with the door open, cozy in his bed, surrounded by superheated gas pumped up from the depths of the earth. So, if step 1 is to make a warm place to sleep, step 2 is to make a knife for stabbing things with. Things like this bunny, who's taking a real interest in the warm room. Unsurprisingly, with his increased melee damage and decent skill, the snow hare never stood a chance. There's another hare on the map, but after that, we've got nothing to eat until something or someone else shows up. Until that happens, I'm having Bishop hastily mine as much steel as he needs to make a paste dispenser with. Speaking of paste, look who's here. Callie Wall, once a paramedic, now Bishop's first victim. She drops some quite nice stuff, but of course we're in it for the food, really. This does make her faction, or wearer, hostile. Ordinarily not ideal, but since our only real source of food for a good while is raiders, the more hostile factions the better. Unfortunately, nothing we can kill is going to be butchered very efficiently for a very long time, because no matter what primary material you make a butcher table from, you need a little wood, and there ain't no trees down here on the South Pole. It's pretty important to keep Bishop happy because when it gets real cold, his furry tail won't save him from hypothermia, which will turn a fairly innocuous mental break like a sad wander into a death sentence. So he made a horseshoe pin, and then he built a windmill, because we've got to power up the paste machine that'll come soon, and also because lighting up the place will help with basically everything. Now, Callie, who we just stabbed to death a moment ago, brought a revolver with her, and a group of megasloths has just wandered onto the map. I mean, you've got to try, right? And while it takes some substantial doing, at the end of the day we move faster than them and have a gun, so eventually one goes down. And since that went so well, why not another? So with 2 megasloths sloppily butchered in the designated corner of the room, that'll feed Bishop for a while, and we can probably find a use for the wool as well. A lynx, having seen this, decided that today was its day to die and went for Bishop. Followed by a single waster named Hopkins, who brought a revolver with him. Bishop waits for him around the paste dispenser and drops him in one shot. Huh. Ah yes, it turns out he's a delicate genie, so his pain threshold is basically non-existent. Yeah, that'll do it. Momentarily I was tempted to take him in and work on recruiting, but we're not really ready for that. And also he'd probably just stub his toe and die of pain shock anyway. Next up, a pair of completely ordinary folk from the compact of Alus are passing by, and Bishop starts salivating and floats on over, holding his knife in a white-knuckle grip. And sure, one by one he cut them to death, but not without injury. Sammy managed to snap off one of his fingers and then Paul followed up with a toe. So that's not ideal, but at least Paul dropped some handy bits. Oh, and I also didn't realise there was another, Sparkles, who, unarmed and actively fleeing, gets gunned down. Now, after patching up the holes left behind by Bishop's newly departed extremities, it's probably time to make this freezing cold hovel into a freezing cold home. With a research table and a regular table in the freshly built annex, we can start working towards batteries, since until we have geothermal power, those will be quite important. For now though, with the freezer, which is actually just any room, full of meat, Bishop's getting lit on some smoke leaf he robbed from a corpse. Of course, he's also robbed quite a few items of clothing by this point, enough to let him withstand negative 73 degrees Celsius, which is very cold, but it will actually get colder than that here sometimes. Right now it's only about negative 30. Anyway, progressing through research in the relative warmth of the base is nice, but we will need some materials sooner or later. So when a quest that rewards some plasteel for fighting off 2 raids comes in, I'm willing to give it a go. But before those raiders arrive, a single slug person shows up. They have a knife, Bishop has a gun. You know the drill. They're put down alive, meaning that we have the chance to steal some untainted clothes for a change, including this hat, which I'm not entirely sure how Bishop is wearing, and then the tox folk that we were expecting show up shortly afterwards. It's a pair of genies both carrying tox grenades, a hilariously ineffective combination. The second wave is considerably scarier. 2 wasters, one with a shotgun. Thankfully, it's still relatively easy to deal with because Bishop outranges him with his pistol. I would consider capturing some of these raiders by the way, but as wasters, their psychite dependency makes them pretty much impossible right now. So we continue our Lonely Polar experience. There's plenty more opportunities coming our way though, like Crispo here, a pretty standard dude. I'd capture this guy, I really would, but of course Bishop shot him dead, so too bad. Never mind though, Cass has someone else for us. A wanderer named Holster wants to join. I can't see exactly what their stats look like, but they are a nurse, so they're likely to have half-decent medical skill at the very least. It turns out they're a nimble psychopath who's incapable of violence, which feels like an odd combination, but whatever, fair enough. I'm just happy to have a second pair of hands around the base. And it really will just be around the base for the most part, because it's way too cold for them to do anything outdoors. Negative 52 degrees C. Even wrapped up in the warmest clothes we have, they're pretty much confined to indoors. But with a second person hanging around, we now have to name the place. So I called the faction Hard Nipple Society and the settlement Polar Nipple. Something was very clearly going through my mind here. Anyway, we've researched batteries, so we'll move on to researching geothermal power, build some batteries, and then start putting some heating into the base, since we've got a fragile, shivering human on board now. And about that human, they're a victoryist, the planet's basic supremacist ideologian. In other words, they're not okay with eating paste, or people paste, for that matter. For now, I'll just put up with this because it will be nice to have a second researcher to blast through some stuff, but eventually we're going to have to do something about that. Not now though, because Bean is here.
The name's Bean.
And he's going for our freshly built batteries, a crime for which he is shot and fed into the paste dispenser. On the ice sheet, events can be pretty one-note at this point in the game. Later on there's more variety, but right now it's largely just raiders getting put down and eaten, and the occasional transport pod, like this one with an incredibly useless Wookiee in it, literally capable of almost nothing. Generally having an Itakin colonist would be handy, what with the warm fur, but it's pretty rare for the correct set of traits to align for an acceptable colonist here, and this guy really emphatically is not it. To break up the string of friendly or incapacitated visitors to the map, next we have, almost simultaneously, a meteor full of components and a solar flare. Lovely. Well, if we've got no power to run the heaters, then let's make some hats real quick. For some reason you can make a tail cap out of human leather, and I don't want to know what they're using for the tail. I had said earlier on that I wasn't going to try and convert Holster just yet, but he's gotten annoyed enough to go on a food binge, which is really not ideal here in the frozen, entirely foodless wastes. So it's time to build a little prison. And it's a shame to lose the extra pair of hands around the house, and it's going to take a really long time to convert them because they're a psychopath and Bishop has absolutely no social skills, and also we still have to feed him, but there's not a whole lot else to do right now. Aside from fending off more absolutely hideously unrecruitable raiders like Smelly the Pig here, who has 0 shooting and still did a better job than Bishop. Screw you, Pig. Enjoy Frostbite. Now, despite those 2 raids, we're not exactly sitting on a hoard of food. In fact, the freezer is kind of looking pretty much empty. Cass? More raiders, please. Ah, good. Here's Paolo the Genie. One tapped because Genie. And that will keep us fed for a few more days. Sometimes quests will come in on the world map, but we can't really do that kind of stuff because everything is a few days off and we'd be leaving the home front undefended. So we just have to keep waiting for Cass to feed us. And to her credit, she does, with Kolol the Wookiee here. I built the grinder thing from the Vanilla Nutrient Paste Expanded mod because I wondered whether I could feed bodies directly into it to bypass the terrible efficiency penalty of the butcher spot. But alas, no, you cannot. So we're stuck with our awful meat yields. We're now 50 days into this colony, and it's going, well, it's going. Let's not dwell on the details too much. Let's instead take a minute to talk about today's sponsor, Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus. A turn-based tactical strategy game set in the eternal conflict of the 41st millennium that lets you enjoy fast-paced battlefield gameplay right on your phone. You can choose between over 80 legendary champions from 18 playable factions. Personally, I love a good Tyrannid. I'm working on one right now. I'll finish it eventually, I promise. Don't look in the grey drawer. Don't look in there, there's nothing in there for you. I actually really love how the game's art style is so clearly inspired by the classic tabletop painting style. I mean, look at them, they have edge highlights and everything. And with a constant flow of fresh content, including new game modes and challenging live events, there's plenty to keep you busy. And with an average 4.5 rating on the app stores, it's clearly worth checking out. So download and play Tacticus for free today, either by scanning the QR code on screen or using my link from below with code TACTIHAZOR and get yourself 50 energy and 10 Nicodemus character shards. Now, back to the ice sheet, where I'm having to seriously consider denying Holster food just to stretch out what we have for maybe another day. A poor old man suffering from Alzheimer's shows up though to feed us for another day at least, but that's really all we'll get, another day. Holster, you're starting to look kind of tasty. This brings me no joy, mainly because it means all the nutrient paste I fed you was completely wasted. But we did just finish researching hydroponics though, so maybe we have some long-term hope here after all. We'll build some basins, but without geothermal power they're not very likely to bear fruit just yet. And then it occurs to me that maybe I should have gone for solar power instead. Or maybe a second windmill will do the trick? There's a way through this starvation, I'm quite sure of it. Please, Rice, grow. Grow. Come on, grow like Bishop's life depends on it. It really does. Maybe, just maybe, if you subscribe to the channel, the rice will make it. Ah, good stuff. That's the most satisfying 4 meals worth of rice I've ever grown. I think I will pivot to solar though real quick. I think focusing on geothermal is ultimately the best idea, but it just has the potential to take too long and starve us out in the process. But another lonely Wookiee shows up and is shot dead, extending our food supply just very slightly again. Now we can sit and watch a windmill for a while. If it keeps turning, we grow rice. If it doesn't, we don't. Okay, fuck you, wind. But alright, we've researched solar now, and after quickly throwing down a few panels, that should be at least mostly stable power. Now Maker the Pig drops from the sky. With a pretty decent stat line, it's worth giving a go, I think. And something I've noticed, by the way, since we're at the pole, solar panels work at just over half capacity for about half the year, because the sun never fully sets. And then once we hit winter, they barely work at all. So they're not a permanent solution, but they'll let us grow rice for now, and that's all that matters. Also, here's a polar bear, so let's gun that down. It's a convenient little boon that will push us just out of desperate sustenance living for a while and see us in a position to actually make some progress. We're harvesting more and more rice as we gently expand the hydroponics operation, but can we feed 3 mouths? I'm not sure, but this paralysed fishman named Jerk sure is interesting, so we're going to give it a go. A quest comes in now that forces a volcanic winter for a few weeks. That doesn't really matter to us, since it has no effect on solar panels, even though it probably should, and it's so cold here that it being colder just doesn't really matter. The reward is 2 masterwork weapons, a nerve spiker and a recurve bow. Nerve spikers can be pretty decent, so Bishop will take that for now. Here's a genie with a sword to help demonstrate it. Spike him, Bishop! Good stuff. Some more uninteresting ice sheet time passes now. A Wookiee raid from a quest that took quite a bit of shooting but wasn't actually particularly dangerous, and aside from that we're just piling up nutrient paste in our slop vat. Until another quest arrives. The Empire want to store their toxic waste with us, and I hadn't considered it, but these quests are kind of free here. The waste packs will be permanently frozen and therefore never dissolve. Great. Easiest accept I've ever clicked. Oh, wait, I didn't consider the fact that I can't just leave them outdoors though, so I do have to do some work, in that I have to build a shed to keep them in. The reward is just a book, by the way. It's not really worth the effort to most people, but you know how I am about Rimworld books. I just really can't help it. I even made a little bookshelf next to a human leather armchair for Bishop to read in. How very cozy. Anyway, the important point is that the waste packs are in a shed, so unless there's some freak double heat wave or something, there's no real risk of them dissolving. Randomly, as a complete aside, Bishop was nearly crushed by some spaceship chunks. I didn't really get a good view of it, but I'm sure it was close. Have you ever had somebody die by meteor or chunk? I don't really know if it can actually happen, so let me know. Another lone raider is put down and we're then rewarded with a crash pod containing Nicole. A kind genie, meaning she also has the wimp trait, which means she'll be incredibly easy to convert and recruit. Her stats are decent, she'd definitely help us push research forward, so alright, make room in the prison cell, another one's coming in. We really can't sustain all of these hungry mouths, so slowly we'll keep expanding the hydroponics operation, only to see all of our crops die in a solar flare anyway. How deeply rude. It's at this point that I actually realise I can use these basins to grow some fibre corn, meaning we do have some access to wood if I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit of food production. But it turns out we don't need to sacrifice anything, because with this timely meteor of steel, we can afford to expand the farm quite a lot. And besides, Cass has our bag, dropping 100 boomalope meat on the edge of the map for us. And we can finally be more productive now because Maker is on board. That's right, we're back to 2 colonists, nearly 100 days into the game. But never mind how long it took, it's time to do some expansion. Maker can't really go outside, and neither should you of course, remain indoors. Therefore we need more space indoors. Now by this point we've done a variety of quest types, but here's a new one. An Imperial shuttle is going to crash land here, at which point we'll help them fend off a raid. It's a simple enough job, but the VIP riding inside wasn't expecting to be exposed to the polar wastes, and therefore will quickly perish. Well, should have worn a coat. So obviously we didn't manage that quest, but this isn't exactly the worst possible outcome. We did still get the components and plasteel that the shuttle was made out of, and the Empire don't seem to mind us eating their fallen VIP either, so that's nice. I'm starting to notice now though that the power grid isn't looking quite so healthy anymore. The batteries aren't full, and I now realise that it's getting quite dark. Oh dear. It seems that we've enjoyed the bountiful sunny season and are quickly plunging into the darkness of a polar winter. We should probably rush the geothermal research along. So in the flickering light of the struggling base, Bishop desperately tries to figure it out. And before things get too dark, he's managed it. Just in time for Nicole to be recruited, meaning future research should go much faster. This also means that we have 3 ice cubists now, and we'll need to start addressing their ideologious needs or face the wrath of their frozen god. A wrath that Nicole seems eager to get acquainted with. She's upset with the situation and is wandering around sadly, outside, which ends predictably, with her on the ground suffering from frostbite, needing to be carried home by Maker. Up to this point, the room with the vent in it has been Bishop's bedroom, so that's obviously going to need emptying out for the building of a generator. But before I can get to work on that, Jerk joins, and then so do some mechanoid raiders. Oh dear. To our north, a pikeman, and a lancer to the south. It's nice of them to separate, but they're still quite dangerous individually. I think the best course of action is to send in the speedy and punchy bishop to get involved in melee, whilst the rest of the crew support from nearby with their pistols. Which for the pikeman worked remarkably well. Didn't even really need the rest, bishop just got the job done. And after a brief moment to warm up in the base, we'll go try a similar tactic on the lancer. Which I'm sure would have worked just as well, but with its first shot, the lancer took off bishop's right arm. Thankfully, it did then die relatively quickly, just like the pikeman, but paying an arm for a single lancer isn't a very good deal. So not ideal at all, but at least he can see his bloody stump in the harsh electric lights of the base now, as the geothermal generator is finally up and running. We now also have a fairly obvious research priority. We're going to need prosthetics. As I mentioned earlier, we also need a shrine now, which is fairly simple to build, and then also fairly simple to use to make Jerk the moral guide. Because despite his name, he's a pretty decent guy. Now I'm feeling all proud about having strong and consistent power, so naturally, here's a solar flare. I've talked before about flares being something of a non-event in Rimworld, but here they can actually starve the colony, since we're on the nutrient-paced equivalent of living paycheck to paycheck. Yeah, we ain't got no food. And now we have to wait a few days before a rice harvest is ready. Oh, hey there, Novak. Sorry, buddy, but we're going to eat you. We simply have no choice. With bellies full of Novak, we finish researching microelectronics, meaning we can start to trade with them there ships up in the sky, hopefully opening the door to a great many new and shiny things in the near future. Assuming we have a future, because starvation is setting in with the rice harvest another day or so away. And I noticed at this point that Nicole wasn't very happy and assumed it was just because of, well, you know, the general situation. But it turns out that Novak was her mother. Oops. But to be fair, even if I had noticed, we were getting really hungry, so I think we probably still would have eaten her. Thankfully then, what with the sudden influx of colonists, we're now getting much more sizable raids. Here's a gang of 6 pigfolk attacking on 2 fronts. They've brought some pretty decent guns with them too, so I don't really want to just face off with them at range. Instead, Bishop will equip a sword we nicked from someone earlier, and I'll send him in there to do some one-armed swordplay. Thanks to a combination of that and some mediocre shooting by the rest, the piggies turn their curly tails soon enough, leaving behind a nice untainted flak jacket. Very good. And that's dinner sorted for a few days, but near immediately afterwards there's a mech cluster. A bit of a weird one though. It's just a couple of turrets with no activation method, so these will just sleep on our map quite possibly forever. Okay then. Alright, anyway, it's taken us a long time to get around to replacing Bishop's arm. He's currently out there mining the steel that will make his new one, which can't be an easy job, but okay Nicole, don't screw this up. Screw it on. Or strap it on? Are prosthetic limbs strap-ons? Wait, don't answer that, forget I asked. We've also finally got around to making a comms station, so we can eventually do some trading. But there's no time to pat our backs, because the local faction of alien weirdos have arrived in large numbers. Large enough numbers that I realise I should have some kind of defences set up by now. They give us just enough time to get a mini turret and some sandbags thrown down before they start their attack. And with a combination of some absolutely terrible shooting from the gang and the turret, and a little bit of the old slicing from Bishop, eventually they run away. I sent Bishop to try and take one of the runners down, since I don't want to waste any food, only to have them turn around and just beat him to the floor. Okay, fair enough, you can leave, point taken. They say that bonds forged in the fires of combat are stronger than any other, and it seems that's true because Jerk and Nicole have immediately afterwards become lovers, which is really handy for a few reasons. 1, they can share a bedroom, so we save some space. And 2, they can share a bedroom, so they'll keep each other entertained. Our next bit of progress is building a high-tech research bench, so that we can work towards deep drilling and the ground-penetrating scanner, which should help to alleviate the ice sheet's resource scarcity. Another bit of progress is the installation of nutrient-paced drippers onto people's beds. If someone in a bed with a dripper falls below 25% hunger, they'll be fed automatically, which saves them some time in the morning. Very good. Alright, finally a trader is overhead, an exotic goods ship, who are more than happy to buy a load of random tat from us for some skill books. Again, I just kind of like collecting books, it's an addiction. I'm going to end up doing some weird planetary library colony soon, I think. Of course, I also bought the customary 2 advanced components from them. For later. Since we've got plenty of food, for a little while now I've had some of the basins growing cotton, and we're starting to very slowly make some progress in laying down carpets. Warm and comfy feet would be so incredibly welcome after coming in from the negative 53 degrees Celsius outdoors. Anyway, we bought those advanced components, and one of them is for this, a ground-penetrating scanner, which needs to be outdoors. Normally not a huge issue, but here that means that realistically only Bishop will be able to use it. And that's fine, but it will be a lot slower than if somebody smarter could spend any real time at it. But we do have time though. It's one of the few things you do have on the ice sheet, time. So he scans, and he scans. I built a little wall around him so he can at least sit under a roof. I think if you were to build a larger room and just left the 4 tiles for the scanner unroofed, you could technically heat this, but I'm not sure whether or not that's possible in such extreme cold. Anyway, he's got a comfy chair for now, so it's all fine. Before he can successfully scan anything, a mech cluster sets up nearby with a weather controller, forcing a foggy rain, which really doesn't matter to us at all, aside from making the video look a bit like crap for a while because the rain hurts YouTube's compression algorithm. And we also had a slave ship overhead who are happy to buy our spare weapons and some gold. I considered buying a nice marine helmet from them, but left it. Better to save the silver for now, I think. And then soon enough, Bishop hits a steel patch right next to the base. Very good, exactly what we needed. Of course, now I need some steel to make a drill, and we've exhausted the map's open supply of the stuff, so I planned some strip mining, but then I realised I can just replace some of the walls I made of steel in the early game with stone walls. I managed to get just enough to make the drill and its power cord, and Bishop can get to work drilling. But there's always something to interrupt him. This time it's Nicole and Jerk's wedding, which is fair enough, I guess. Once that's done, it's back to work, which I assumed he'd be better at. Bishop only has level 7 mining. I kind of figured it would be better by now, but never mind, this is going to be pretty slow though. Since he'll be spending so much time in there, I figured I'd wall in the drill so it can be lit up and maybe even heat it for a comfier drilling experience, which involves multi-analyzing, because now that we have near infinite steel, we need to start turning it into components. So as the world turns green thanks to a toxic fallout event, we'll build that multi-analyzer. I guess it's a good thing we built the drilling shed as well, because it keeps Bishop safe from the fallout. But not from the mechanoids. More have shown up. Some Scorchers, a Lancer, and a Pikeman. We'll face them at our base defences, repelling the Scorchers pretty easily. It's raining, so they're not particularly dangerous. And now onto the longer ranged ones. I sent Bishop and Nicole to the Pikeman whilst the others keep the Lancer busy. And it smashed his leg off. Oh, I see. Well, we did finish them off. It just cost another limb, that's all. So we'll have to throw 4 more of our precious components down the drain to make him a new leg, and then an Imperial shuttle crashes. I figured I'd just leave them to either die in the cold or to the raiders, which they do. Constantius here drops his Persona Plasma Sword, and I assumed that, as usual, it wouldn't be of any use to me. But wait, it has the Freewielder trait, which means anyone can use it. Oh buddy, Bishop just got an upgrade. Fabrication is researched now, a fairly major milestone, but we need another advanced component for the bench, so we can't make use of that milestone just yet. While we wait for some advanced components, time to go and deal with that weather controller. I'm starting to get sick of this rain. And while Bishop's on the way there, another waste pack quest comes in. 181 this time, for a recon helmet. Tasty. But first, of course, the weather controller. As I usually do with these sites, I completely ignore the mechs, break into the building and destroy the thing before quietly running away. Good stuff. Finally, we can see the base without rain again. A defoliator lands with some mechs to defend it, but I want to handle this waste pack quest before dealing with that. So as quickly as we can manage, we'll expand the toxic shed, and then before filling it, deal with yet another shuttle crash quest. Which weirdly never spawned the raid that was supposed to come with it. Maybe because we had too many hostiles on the map already? I don't know, whatever. With that sorted, we'll pop Bishop's new recon helmet on and get to hauling those new waste packs. Which takes a long time. A really surprisingly long time actually, but eventually he gets it all safely packed away, and now we can deal with those mechs at the defoliator. Right after building an autocannon, just in case we end up luring the bots home and need some extra firepower. I sent out the gang to face the bots, with Bishop tanking most of the damage in melee whilst the rest support as usual. Even making use of Jerk's Icy Vomit ability for a change, which works quite nicely. I'll never use it again, it's hard to remember these things. Anyway, the crew destroy the defoliator whilst Bishop limps home, and hey, there's the advanced component that we need for a fabrication bench. Very good. So Bishop gets that built, and from here on we're going to need industrial quantities of steel to keep the place stocked up with components. A little while later, a baseliner named Ash drops from the sky with a really very decent stat line, including burning passions in plants, medical and social. Good stuff. So we'll immediately drag her inside for conversion and recruitment. Awkwardly, I have to keep her in the geothermal room for now because everywhere else is in use, which means her prison cell is an open door arrangement, otherwise she'll cook to death, which isn't very conducive to recruitment. Another mech cluster arrives on the world map, much more annoying this time as it's a psychic droner, and it's about a 2-day journey from the base, so we'll send Bishop back out for that very shortly. In the meantime, there's a megasloth just outside the door, ready to be gunned down. And you know what? I'm gonna build a real butcher table for this. Would you look at that? Actual efficient butchery on the ice sheet. What a sight to behold. Alright, now time to go, Bishop. Go get some more mechs. While he's on the way there, something I'd been waiting a good while for appears. A bulk goods ship is overhead, and we'll buy some plasteel, a load of wood, and 2 more advanced components from them. Bishop makes it to the mech cluster, does his job and heads home, where Cass decides to immediately refund our purchase from that trader with a meteor of silver. Thanks, Cass. Now, I really would like to make Bishop complete again. Those prosthetics of his are holding him back in combat especially, so we'll start to fabricate advanced components whenever we can to spend on bionics. But that kind of fabrication takes a while, so quite a lot later we'll finally start making some. Oh, never mind, solar flare. After which, but before we can make a new arm and attach it to Bishop, the local xenofreaks drop all over the place in pods. This is a good kind of raid for a speedy, shielded melee combatant like Bishop, since the enemies tend to arrive in small groups or alone, ready to be cut down one by one. Okay, now we've made a pair of bionic arms, but we don't have the medicine to install them. But that's okay, because in the time it takes to grow some, Ash is recruited, and then with her high medical skill, we'll fit one. But we are going to have to wait for more medicine to do the other. This time, while we wait for the medicine to grow, we get a load of Arctic wolves, which also die very easily to the plasma sword and the newly improved defensive setup. But they'll die even easier after popping on Bishop's second bionic arm. He's really ascending now. I love when you start to get that 1 Giga Chad going in the colony. And since we're ascending, let's also start using sleep accelerators, since we've got plenty of food to deal with the increased appetite. Now here's a pretty scary looking mech hive raid, including 3 lancers. Yeep. I think our defenses are strong enough for this, but just to be sure, I'll quickly finish off this wall to force them to approach all of the turrets at once. The lancers arrived first, so Bishop gets to work on them. Nicole is on the floor in seconds, but it's nothing major, she just got shot in the foot and has no pain tolerance. With the lancers down to Bishop and the Scorchers struggling to get anywhere near the defenses, I'm actually very pleased with how that turned out. But I would still be wise to properly killbox this area up a bit, since out in the open lancers outrange mini-turrets. It turns out now that all of our advancement has seen the base's power usage creep past what we're generating. So as quickly as possible we'll throw up another geothermal generator and get power stabilized just in time for yet more mechs to arrive. A breaching raid this time. Oh dear. I had Bishop run out to the termite, taking it down good and quick, but that doesn't stop the rest of the mechs from simply shooting their way in regardless. So this is a bit of a problem. I had him go for the rest of the mechs, backed up by Maker and Jerk as usual, who weren't being particularly useful, meaning that before too long he was on the floor by the hands, or rather scythes, of a scyther. When it goes for Maker and Jerk though, they can drag it to the turret's line of fire, which I probably should have just done with Bishop, but anyway, then they also have the ranged mechs to deal with. While they're engaged, I tried to slip in Nicole to rescue Bishop, and she pretty much immediately caught one from the Lancer and went down herself. Okay, this isn't going well, so Maker is wearing a smoke pack. As a last resort, I sent him in to try and blind the mechs, which seemingly did nothing, so he also went down. Jerk makes it inside as Ash nips out to pick up Bishop, whilst Nicole is dragging herself in on the floor. Poor Maker, though, isn't going to make it. Jerk did try to rescue him, but he was too far gone. And now we have that last pikeman just chilling out there, slowly shooting into our base. It seems to recognize the value of the nutrient paste vat and wants to destroy it. I had Jerk try to take it out through the hole in the wall, but the pikeman won that skirmish, meaning it manages to destroy our food supply. Damn it. Once Bishop was well enough to walk, I had him go out and try to beat it down, but he also lost the skirmish, leaving only Nicole, the extremely fragile genie, to get the job done. Which, mercifully, blessedly, she does. So, we survived, but I'm not sure we'll continue to survive for very long. Especially because, understandably, everyone's mood is a bit low. Bishop had a tantrum, and I wasn't actually fully paying attention at the time, but now that I watch the footage back, I can see that he straight up went out there and smashed his plasma sword to bits. Good one, buddy. So I suspect we're entering a death spiral. There's no food, and there won't be any for a couple of days as the farm gets back online, which isn't going to be fast enough for poor Jerk, who starves to death. I had Bishop try to butcher him, but he collapsed of his own starvation in the process, meaning Ash had to carry him to bed and feed him Jerk raw. You know it's bad when your starving colonists are being fed the corpses of the ones who already starved. But we do get some rice, meaning we've technically recovered from this. However, here is yet another mech raid. Smaller this time, only 3, but including a Tesseron, which went with its Scorcher friend directly to our new geothermal generator. And that's followed up by a fairly sizable Xeno raid, which was also fought off. The turrets do fine work on people, but Bishop did take a bit of a beating in that fight. So once again, we've technically survived, but well, Nicole is on a sad wander outside, which she'll actually surprisingly survive because she has a heavy fur parka, unlike poor Bishop, who won't survive the infection that took hold in one of his many wounds. I wasn't expecting him to suddenly die, and I forgot that because of his gas bags, he explodes when he does. So now his lovely plush carpets are on fire, and no one can go in to put them out. It's making Nicole's bedroom next door over 100 degrees C, despite which she really wants to sleep in there. And yeah, I could assign her a different bed or just break a wall on the other side of Bishop's bedroom to vent the heat, but you know what? If Nicole wants to sleep in an oven, she can. And if we're calling it, let's send Ash in there with a tox pack and just let her rip a real nasty fart to finish things properly. The man in black arrives and I command him to strip naked and freeze to death on the ice, and there we have it. Game over. I give up. The ice sheet is an interesting challenge, but it's kind of done to death at this point, which is why I wanted to add a weird modifier in the form of a well-adapted superorganism like Bishop. But ultimately I don't think it really changed much. It just made the early game progress faster because he could work outdoors, and let us take advantage of a few situations where his speedy movement let him kite animals around. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then give it a like, but whatever you do, remain indoors. You're a snivelling, weak human, and will quickly freeze to death out there. Until next time, goodbye.